maybe at the end we can have a more broader discussion if it's not enough. No? Because if I focus on one, I'm worried that I will. No, also because it's very late already. So about Muslims in Sri Lanka, Muslims are, I think, approximately about 7 to 8% in Sri Lanka. I think in the recent past, the recent meaning, like if I go back to about 15 years or so, there has been what I would call Islamophobia in Sri Lanka. Hostility, suspicion directed towards people of Islamic faith and generally Muslims. In Sri Lanka, the Muslims identify themselves as a very distinct ethnic community, but also at the same time with the faith community, Islamic faith. So there has been a lot of violence directed against the Muslim community. Now, for example, there were towns and cities where shops, houses, mosques, shops and houses of Muslims and mosques were burned and Muslim people were killed. Well, I haven't heard of such organized, intense violence, for example, against any community in the last few years in Sri Lanka. No, like not against the LGBTQ community, not against the Dalits. So in the last 15 years or so, I would say that Muslims are the community in Sri Lanka that have been facing a lot of physical violence. In addition to the overall hostility, Islamophobia as such. The bombings of 3 churches and some pails in 2009, which killed around 300 people, injured about 500 people, happened in this context. So already this violence against the Muslims had happened and the Islamophobia was continuing when these attacks happened. And there's no dispute that these attacks were implemented by Muslims, those who claim to be Muslims. But there is a lot of debate in Sri Lanka till today, 7 years after these attacks, whether these attacks were planned by Sinhalese Buddhist politicians in order to get political power. And this is a very big debate, even like a very prominent Catholic leader who has been kind of very vocal in seeking justice for these bombings. And many opposition figures, journalists, activists have been saying that this could be a conspiracy. So essentially saying that the Muslims who implemented the attacks were just the implementers, but the masterminds or people who really planned these attacks were not Muslims, but Sinhalese Buddhist leaders who want to get power and were successful in getting power, mainly the Rajapaksa family, which I will probably talk about later. And they did get power about 6 months after these bombings. That immediately after bombings, there was what I would call a witch hunt against Muslims, legally and socially, politically. Like socially, politically, Muslims were, particularly women, were stopped from wearing their traditional dresses, which has never happened in Sri Lanka before. And there was a lot of hostility in schools, in public institutions against Muslims. Legally, there were lots of Muslims who were just arrested on suspicion, held without any basis for like several months and years.